The rugged mountains and lush meadows of California. It's an idyllic setting. For many, it's the American dream. And for pilots, the freedom to see this beautiful country from the air is the reason we learned to fly in the first place. But while we're enjoying all this beauty, we just might forget there are wires down here. Wires are a necessary part of modern life. And though they're a hazard at times, we can't live without them. They carry most of our telephone conversations and they transmit our electrical power. In short, they're indispensable. Pilots have to learn to live with wires, but it's not always easy. Recently, a working group of several California utilities and representatives from the aviation industry decided to address the issue head-on. After a 3-year research and feasibility study, the group reached a consensus on both a wire marking program and a pilot education effort to help prevent aircraft wire strikes. This video is one part of the wire strike prevention program. At one time or another, we've probably all had a closer encounter with wires than we would have liked, some closer than others. In an average year, some 115 pilots fly into wires of one kind or another. Back in 1989, a student pilot and his instructor earned national press coverage when they flew their Cessna into power lines near Ontario, California. Neither pilot was hurt in the accident, but the airplane was definitely a little worse for wear. More recently, both pilots were killed when this helicopter lost its rotor to wires in the Cahuenga Pass, north of Los Angeles. Contrary to what you might think, wire strikes are a bigger problem than they seem. Between the beginning of 1986 and the end of 1990, FAA and NTSB records suggest there were some 584 wire strike accidents on file for civil aircraft alone. This doesn't count military strikes or unreported wire collisions, the latter evidenced by power company reports of literally thousands of broken wires unaccompanied by a crumpled aircraft. Comparing reported wire strikes with actual downed wires suggests that only about 10% are reported. It might seem that wire strikes are the greatest threat from tall obstacles, such as this 820-foot radio tower near Fullerton Airport in Fullerton, California. In fact, though, at least 70% of all wire strike accidents occur at or below 100 feet AGL. Location, rather than height, would seem to be the more important determinant of a wire strike hazard. Another common misconception about wire strikes is that the pilots involved are all low-time amateurs. Not so. In fact, studies of past accidents suggest just the opposite. Most pilots who run into wires are experienced aviators. More than half of all strike victims have 1,000 hours or more logged, and the largest group of rotary wing aviators involved are in the 10,000 hours and up group. Similarly, the misconception is that wire strikes only occur during buzzing or other unauthorized low-level maneuvers. Though all the low-level passes you see here were legal and performed for the video program Wonderful World of Flying, wire strikes don't normally result from buzzing. Accident statistics suggest legal flight operations such as crop dusting, police surveillance, and medevac generate many strikes. Pilots who do strike wires can expect the FAA to aggressively pursue an FAR violation. Though it's true helicopters do operate at low level more than fixed wings, wire strikes don't always happen to the other guy. Fixed-wing aircraft are among the most common offenders. In fact, airplanes account for 4 times more accidents than do helicopters. Fully 75% of all these aircraft, fixed and rotary wing, are destroyed or severely damaged in wire collisions. Finally, you might logically expect weather to be a factor in wire strike accidents. As it turns out, logic isn't always correct. Studies suggest visibility is typically more than 3 miles, and sky conditions are clear to scattered when aircraft collide with wires. The good weather applies equally to fixed and rotary wing accidents, so apparently bad weather doesn't often force pilots down. Some pilots believe wire strikes could be avoided altogether if all wires were marked or buried, but that's obviously a very expensive and impractical solution, and no guarantee that marked wires will be seen, as in the Cahuenga Pass incident. Which wires to mark is the problem. Wires at airports such as this one near Sacramento, California, are obvious choices, and that's a key as to where to place warning devices such as these orange balls. Wire location and visibility are more important marking criterion than height or span. Strikes are less likely at some locations, such as this TV transmitter farm on the top of a mountain. But even towers that are relatively easy to spot may have supporting wires that are nearly invisible. Though, as the study revealed, illegal flight operations aren't often a cause of wire strikes, FAR 91-119 specifies minimum altitudes for both fixed-wing and rotary wing operation. The reg states no aircraft may operate below 1,000 feet AGL over a congested area and 500 feet over an uncongested area. Helicopters may operate at lower levels, provided they can make a successful emergency landing in the event of a power failure. Depicting all wires graphically on charts is no guarantee of solving the problem, though there's little question a review of charts prior to a low-level flight is an excellent idea. Not all wires are depicted on charts, however. Ironically, none are shown below 200 feet in height, where statistics show the most wire strikes occur. So even careful pre-flight scrutiny of available reference material before a low-level mission won't protect you against a strike. Merely knowing that wires are nearby isn't any guarantee of safety. In some 40% of recorded collisions, pilots who collided with wires knew they were near, but still collided with them, often because they were distracted. A high recon pass is always a good policy before a low-level run or landing. Ideally, a ground director can help keep an aircraft clear of obstacles, but that's a luxury that's not always available. Unprepared landing sites can include hazards that may be almost impossible to spot from the air. One possible reason that fixed wings clip wires 4 times more often than helicopters may be simply speed. Helicopters typically operate at lower airspeeds and can even stop in mid-air if necessary to avoid a wire strike. A helicopter patrolling at 40 knots requires only a third the distance to turn and avoid compared to a fixed-wing aircraft flying at 80 knots. In addition, a pilot flying slower can fly closer to the wires before initiating corrective action, allowing him more time to spot the wires themselves or the support structure on either side. Distance is a key factor. A pilot is 10 times more likely to spot wires at a horizontal distance of 800 feet than at 2,400 feet. For both types of aircraft, a pull-up is a more efficient avoidance maneuver than a turn. Both fixed wings and helicopters can modify their flight path quicker with a pull-up than a turn. There are several visual techniques that can help in this see and avoid requirement. Nature rarely creates straight lines, and such lines can alert a pilot to the presence of wires ahead, especially in the vicinity of highways, canals, railroad tracks, and other man-made routes. Pilots who fly low level regularly make it a habit to scan left and right through a full 90 degrees to look for the origination point of wires. Another visual cue that many experienced pilots use once they spot a wire is to fly with reference to the vertical support structure rather than the wire itself. Wires may be oxidized or corroded, so there's virtually no reflection to attract the eye. They may blend well with the background under certain light conditions, making them almost impossible to see. Finally, pilots operating in a crew environment should announce any wire they spot so other crew members can help maintain proper separation. All crew members should remember they're in a wire environment whenever the aircraft is operated below a ridgeline. If you do have a close encounter with a wire and wish to alert others to the hazard, report the problem to the FAA and also to NASA with the Aviation Safety Reporting System. If your mission requires frequent operation at low level, consider installing a wire strike protection system. Several companies offer such systems for both fixed-wing and rotary-wing aircraft. These systems are intended to slice wires apart before they can bring an aircraft down. If you'll be required to fly low, reduce fuel load to maximize climb performance in case you spot a wire. Avoid operation at or near max gross weight. Finally, schedule a low-level mission so you won't have to look into a bright rising or setting sun that further obscures the wires.
In review of this wire strike prevention program, at least 70% of all wire strike accidents occur at or below 100 feet AGL. Most pilots that hit wires are experienced aviators. More than 50% have over 1,000 hours. Wire strikes do not normally result from buzzing. However, regardless of the reason, FAA will investigate a wire strike mishap and enforcement action is likely. 75% of wire strike accidents result in substantial damage or destruction. Weather is not a primary cause of most wire strike mishaps. Here are some other points to remember. Consult aeronautical and other charts before flying low level. Perform a high-altitude recon pass before all low-level flights. Use a ground guide or communicate with ground personnel regarding wires before flying low or landing at a remote site. Reduce your airspeed when flying in a wire environment. Normally, a pull-up is more effective than a sharp turn in avoiding wires. Fly over the supporting structure, not the wire's span. And finally, look for supporting structures, not the wire.
Except for takeoff and landing, most of us will never have a legitimate reason to operate our aircraft at the extreme low levels where wire strikes are most common. But for those pilots who do, the message is clear. Wires are a hazard we have to learn to live with, and that means giving them the widest berth possible.
Clear prop.